15 years of dedication should have guaranteed me a permanent seat at the table. Until a young hotshot walked in with his smug smile and modernization plan that started with eliminating me. But he didn't know that in an old leather briefcase gathering dust on my shelf lay a forgotten clause that could transfer ownership of this entire empire after one closed-door meeting. And when that moment comes, I won't just return, I'll occupy the highest chair while he walks out the door without a word. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and for 15 years, I believed competence was my armor in the corporate battlefield of Stratasiny systems. At 42, I'd climbed from junior analyst to deputy chief operating officer, earning each promotion through sweat, sleepless nights, and an uncanny ability to salvage disasters that would have sunk lesser executives. They called me the company's crisis resolver, the one person who could walk into a burning project and emerge with something salvageable. The Stratasine building rose 47 floors into the Seattle skyline, its glass facade reflecting the constant drizzle that defined our winters. My office on the 38th floor had become my second home. Perhaps more familiar than my actual apartment in Queen Anne. The mahogany desk, the leather chairs that still smelled faintly new after 3 years, the view of Elliott Bay that I rarely had time to appreciate, these were the markers of success I'd earned through pure merit, never playing the political games that consumed so many of my colleagues. I'd survived 3 CEOs, each with their vision of transformation. Under Marcus Webb, we'd pivoted to cloud infrastructure. During Jennifer Park's reign, artificial intelligence became our North Star. Through it all, I remained the constant, the institutional memory, the steady hand that kept operations running while leadership chased the next quarterly earnings call. My teams respected me not because I demanded it, but because I'd never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. When the servers crashed at 2:30 in the morning, I was there with them, mainlining coffee and troubleshooting code. The atmosphere began to shift 6 months ago when our latest CEO, Daniel Morrison, made his first significant hire without consulting the senior leadership team. Evan Brooks arrived like a storm system moving in from the Pacific, sudden, forceful, and impossible to ignore. At 31, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never truly failed, his MBA from Wharton worn like a badge of honor rather than mere education. Strategic Development Director, his title read, though whispers in the break room suggested he was being groomed for something bigger. I first met Evan in the executive conference room during a Monday morning leadership briefing. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary, his handshake firm to the point of aggression. "Lauren Mitchell," he said, as if tasting my name. "I've heard you're the one who keeps the lights on around here." "I prefer to think of it as keeping the ship steady," I replied, matching his grip. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes ships need new captains." The comment lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. Over the following weeks, I watched him maneuver through the corporate hierarchy with surgical precision. He scheduled one-on-ones with every department head except mine. He launched initiatives that duplicated work my teams had been doing for years, presenting them as revolutionary innovations. Most disturbing was how Daniel Morrison seemed entranced by every PowerPoint Evan produced, nodding along to projections that anyone with operational experience would recognize as fantasy. My sanctuary remained the early morning hours, arriving at 6:15 when the office was still empty, the floors quiet, except for the hum of servers and climate control. This was when I did my best thinking, reviewing reports without interruption, preparing for the battles I sensed approaching. The coffee maker in the executive kitchen became my confessor, the only witness to my growing unease. Standing at my window one gray Thursday morning, watching the ferries cross the Sound, I couldn't shake the feeling that my 15 years of building something meaningful at Stratasine Systems were about to be tested in ways I'd never imagined. The fog rolled in from the water, obscuring the Olympic mountains, and I thought about my father, who'd helped build this company from nothing before I was even born. He'd taught me that integrity and hard work would always triumph over politics and manipulation. I was about to learn how naive that belief had been. The erosion began subtly, like water wearing away stone. First, it was the Monday restructuring meetings that appeared on everyone's calendar except mine. "Must be an oversight," my assistant Maria said, but we both knew better. Through the glass walls of Conference Room A, I watched Evan orchestrate discussions about operational efficiency my domain while I sat excluded, reviewing spreadsheets that suddenly felt meaningless. Then came the project reassignments, the Pacific Northwest cloud migration. A 3-year initiative I'd shepherded from conception was suddenly under the purview of Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old senior manager who'd been with the company less than 18 months. "We need fresh perspectives," Evan explained during a Tuesday staff meeting, his tone suggesting this was forward-thinking rather than insulting. "Lauren's expertise is too valuable to be confined to single projects." Too valuable. The phrase tasted like copper in my mouth. In corporate speak, it meant too expensive, too entrenched, too much of yesterday's thinking. I'd heard it before, always preceding someone's quiet departure. My team began receiving invitations to innovation workshops, scheduled during my standing one-on-ones. When I confronted Evan about the timing conflicts, he smiled that cold smile. "We can't let traditions stand in the way of progress. Can we?" The isolation crept in gradually. Conversations stopped when I entered the break room. Colleagues who'd sought my advice for years now routed their questions through Evan's hand-picked lieutenants. Even Marcus, my longtime ally in engineering, avoided eye contact during elevator rides. The 38th floor, once my kingdom, began to feel like a prison where I was both warden and sole inmate. At lunch, I found myself eating alone more often, watching from my office as groups formed without me in the cafeteria below. The Thursday happy hours at Pike Place Market, which I'd attended religiously for a decade, suddenly shifted to Wednesdays, a day I always had board prep. No one mentioned the change to me directly. The psychological warfare intensified during the quarterly business review. Evan presented my team's achievements as examples of legacy thinking that's held us back. Twisting our 97% uptime record into evidence of risk aversion. "We're not trying hard enough if we're not failing occasionally," he announced, garnering approving nods from Daniel Morrison. I wanted to scream that failing meant lost revenue, damaged client relationships, and destroyed trust. Instead, I sat silent, my jaw clenched so tight I'd need ibuprofen later. The young faces around the table, Evan's recruits, typed notes into their laptops, documenting a narrative where 15 years of operational excellence was reframed as institutional stagnation. Sarah Williams from Human Resources started scheduling check-ins with my direct reports. She claimed it was part of a company-wide engagement initiative, but curiously, only my team seemed subjected to this scrutiny. The questions she asked, relayed to me later by loyal team members, were telling, "Do you feel your department is adapting to industry changes? Would you describe your leadership as innovative or traditional?" The seeds of doubt were being planted systematically. Even I began questioning myself during the drive home to Queen Anne. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe the industry had evolved beyond my expertise. Maybe Evan Brooks, with his Wharton MBA and his disruption rhetoric, understood something I didn't. But then I'd remember the Christmas Eve 5 years ago when I'd personally driven to the data center at 11:45 at night to prevent a complete system failure, or the time I'd negotiated us out of a $10 million contract breach by rebuilding trust with a client ready to sue. Evan Brooks had never faced a genuine crisis, never felt the weight of keeping 800 jobs secure through careful, unglamorous operational excellence. The final insult came via email on a Friday afternoon at 4:20. The subject line read, "Organizational Optimization Initiative." My entire department was being reimagined, with responsibilities distributed across 3 new divisions, all reporting to Evan. My role would be transitioned to a special projects advisor position, corporate nomenclature for a parking spot where executives waited to be packaged out. I read the email twice, then a third time, each word burning itself into my memory. 15 years reduced to corporate jargon and empty gratitude for my invaluable contributions to Stratosign's journey. Outside my window, the Seattle skyline darkened with approaching storm clouds. The city lights began their evening awakening, indifferent to the small tragedy playing out in this glass tower. I thought about my father then, about the stories he told of building this company when it was just 5 people in a Belltown garage. He'd always said the company would take care of those who took care of it. As rain began pattering against the windows, I realized that promise had died long before he did. The house in Queen Anne felt different that Friday evening. Usually, It was my refuge from corporate warfare. But tonight, the silence amplified my rage. I poured myself a generous glass of Malbec and stood in my father's old study, unchanged since his death 8 years ago. His presence lingered here in the pipe tobacco scent that somehow persisted, in the engineering blueprints framed on the walls, in the photographs of Stratoscine's early days when innovation meant solving real problems, not disrupting for disruption's sake. I needed to clear this room eventually. The real estate agent had mentioned it during her last visit, suggesting it would increase resale value, but I couldn't bring myself to dismantle this shrine to a different era of business, when handshake deals meant something and loyalty ran both directions. The closet door stuck as always, requiring that familiar lift and pull motion I'd perfected over the years. Inside, boxes of his belongings waited like patient sentinels. I was searching for his old Stratoscine ID badge, some masochistic need to see his face from better times when my hand brushed against leather, soft and worn. The briefcase was buried beneath tax returns from the 90s, brown leather, brass clasps oxidized with age, his initials, RM, barely visible on the lock. Robert Mitchell. I'd seen him carry it every day until he sold his stake and retired. Said he was tired of fighting the vulture capitalists who'd invaded the board. The clasps opened with surprising ease. Inside, the smell of old paper and leather polish transported me to childhood memories of his home office, where I'd do homework while he worked late into the evening. The briefcase contained yellowed legal pads covered in his precise handwriting, technical drawings for products that revolutionized server architecture, and a manila envelope marked Foundation Documents Important. My wine sat forgotten as I spread the papers across his desk. Stock certificates from 1981, the original incorporation papers, partnership agreements between my father and Thomas Stratton, the company's other founder, and then, tucked between two documents like an afterthought, a single page that made my hands tremble. Supplemental Agreement to Founder's Stock Allocation, dated March 15th, 1982. The language was dense, typical legal prose of that era, but Clause 7b stood out like a beacon. In the event that any direct descendant of the founding partners is terminated from employment without documented cause directly related to criminal activity, fiscal malfeasance, or gross negligence resulting in material damage to the corporation, the estate of said founding partner shall have the right to reclaim 51% controlling interest in the corporation at par value, such transfer to be executed within 30 days of wrongful termination. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My father had been paranoid about hostile takeovers. Having watched too many founders pushed out of their own companies, this was his insurance policy, hidden in plain sight among documents no one had reviewed in 40 years. The attached memo in his handwriting explained everything. Lauren, if you're reading this, then Stratoscine has forgotten what we built it for. Tom Stratton agreed to this clause after Johnson Corp tried to force us out in '82. We kept it quiet, filed it with the state but never mentioned it in board meetings. The current leadership won't even know it exists. It's buried in supplemental filings from before digital records. Richard Hale has a copy. He'll know what to do. Don't let them erase us, Dad. Richard Hale. I hadn't thought about my father's attorney in years. He must be in his 70s now, if he was still practicing. A quick search on my laptop showed he was not only practicing, but had built one of Seattle's most respected corporate law firms specializing in technology company disputes. I photographed every page with my phone, then carefully returned the documents to the briefcase. The wine had warmed, but I drank it anyway, standing at the window overlooking the sound. The fairy lights traced their paths through dark water, reliable and constant, following routes established decades ago. My phone buzzed with text messages from my team, words of support, confusion, anger on my behalf. Jake Morrison had already sent a meeting invite for Monday morning to discuss the transition. The machine was moving forward, assuming I'd go quietly like so many before me. They had no idea what they'd awakened. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Richard Hale. The subject line was simple. Robert Mitchell's daughter needs your help. As I typed, I could almost hear my father's voice. The best revenge isn't served cold, Lauren. It's served with proper documentation. The briefcase sat on the desk beside me, its worn leather surface catching the light from the desk lamp. Inside it lay the seeds of Evan Brooks's destruction. planted 40 years ago by a man who understood that in business, as in engineering, redundancy isn't waste, it's insurance. Tomorrow, I'd begin my research. Tonight, I'd finish this wine and imagine Evan's face when he realized the legacy thinking he so despised had just checkmated his entire game. Monday arrived with unusual clarity. The Seattle morning crisp and bright for once. I dressed carefully my best suit, the one I'd worn to my VP promotion 5 years ago. If they wanted to execute me professionally, I'd make them look me in the eye while they did it. The commute felt different knowing it might be one of my last. Every familiar landmark, the coffee shop where I grabbed my usual Americano. The newsstand where Ahmad always saved me a Wall Street Journal. The security guard who'd watched me age 15 years in this building took on the weight of ending things. Maria had tears in her eyes when I reached the 38th floor. "They scheduled you for 9:30 in the boardroom," she whispered. "HR will be there." The 2 hours until that meeting stretched like pulled taffy. I cleaned my desk methodically, boxing personal items with the same precision I'd applied to every project. The photo from my team's first product launch. The crystal paperweight acknowledging our 99% uptime achievement. The coffee mug my developers had given me that read, "World's Most Patient Boss," after a particularly brutal deployment weekend. At 9:25, I walked to the boardroom. Through the glass, I could see them assembled like a tribunal, Evan Brooks at the head of the table, Sarah Williams from HR with her folder of documents, and Daniel Morrison attempting to look somber despite the satisfaction radiating from his posture. "Lauren, please sit," Daniel began as I entered. The chair they'd left for me was at the far end, maximizing the distance between us, a psychological tactic I recognized from the management books Evan probably memorized at Wharton. Sarah launched into the script, her voice carrying the false empathy of someone who'd delivered this speech dozens of times. "As you know from Friday's communication, Stratocene is undergoing a strategic restructuring. Your position has been identified as redundant in our new organizational model." "Redundant?" I repeated, tasting the word. 15 years of operational excellence, and I'm redundant. Evan leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "It's not personal, Lauren. The industry demands agility, fresh perspectives. Your contributions have been valued, but it's time for new leadership approaches." "Your approaches, you mean?" His smile was sharp as glass. "The board has confidence in my vision." Sarah pushed the separation agreement across the table. 3 months severance insulting for my tenure, and a non-disparagement clause that would silence any criticism. "We'll need your signature today. Your access expires at noon." I didn't touch the papers. "And if I refuse?" "Then you leave with nothing," Daniel said quietly. "No severance, no reference, no continuation of benefits. I'd advise against that path." The room fell silent except for the HVAC system's whisper. They expected capitulation. Perhaps tears. Maybe angry words they could later use to justify their decision. Instead, I stood slowly, straightening my jacket. "I need time to review this with my attorney." Sarah's face tightened. "The offer expires at close of business today." "Then you'll have my answer by 5. Evan's confidence cracked slightly. "Don't make this harder than necessary. Lauren, you're too smart to burn bridges in this industry." I looked at him directly then. Really looked at him. 31 years old. Never built anything. Never saved anything. Never fought for anything except his own advancement. "You know what your problem is. Evan, you're so busy disrupting. You never learned what's worth preserving." Security escorted me out standard procedure. They assured me, nothing personal. The elevator ride felt eternal. Other employees avoiding eye contact as news had clearly spread. My keycard was deactivated before I reached the lobby. 15 years reduced to a security risk in the span of 3 hours. Outside, Seattle's weather had turned, rain beginning to fall in sheets. I stood under the building's overhang, watching employees scurry past, and pulled out my phone. Richard Hale answered on the second ring. "Lauren, I've been expecting your call. How bad was it?" "They want me gone by end of business. 3 months severance if I sign an NDA." "Don't sign anything. Can you meet me at my office at 2? "Richard, about that clause." "Not over the phone. 2 o'clock. Bring everything." The rain intensified as I walked to my car, soaking through my coat. In the parking garage, I sat behind the wheel for a moment, engine running, watching water cascade down the windshield. They thought they'd won. Evan Brooks probably already had someone measuring my office. But in my trunk sat my father's briefcase, and in Richard Hale's office sat 40 years of corporate law expertise. Evan wanted to play corporate games with someone who'd learned the rules from the men who wrote them. The termination meeting had been their victory lap. They just didn't know they were running the wrong race entirely. Richard Hale's office occupied the top floor of a Pioneer Square building. All exposed brick and original timber beams, Seattle history preserved in architecture. The receptionist, recognizing my name, led me straight to his corner office where Richard stood examining documents through reading glasses that made him look more professor than corporate attorney. "Lauren," he said, embracing me warmly. "You look just like Robert when he was fighting the Johnson Corp takeover. Same determined jaw." The briefcase sat between us on his mahogany desk. Richard handled the documents with reverence, occasionally murmuring phrases like "brilliant" and "ironclad." When he reached the supplemental agreement, he actually laughed to sound both delighted and dangerous. "Your father was paranoid, God rest his soul, but his paranoia might have just saved you." He pulled up something on his computer. "I've been tracking Stratasini's corporate filings for years, per your father's instructions. This clause has never been superseded, modified, or mentioned in any board resolution. It's sleeping law valid but forgotten. So it would hold up." "Hold up." Richard removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly. "Lauren, this isn't just defensible. It's a corporate nuclear weapon, the way your father structured this. If you're terminated without cause, and from what you've told me, this is textbook wrongful termination. The controlling interest transfers automatically. No vote needed. No board approval required. It's a contractual obligation that predates every other agreement." My heart hammered against my ribs. "They offered me 3 months severance if I sign by 5 today." "Don't sign anything. In fact, don't respond at all. Let them think you're beaten." Richard pulled out a legal pad, his handwriting as precise as my father's had been. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we document everything, every email, every excluded meeting, every project reassignment. Build the case that this was termination without cause." "I've been keeping records," I said, pulling out my phone. Forwarded emails to my personal account, screenshots of calendar changes, even recordings of a few meetings where Evan explicitly stated my work was satisfactory while simultaneously undermining me. Richard's smile turned predatory. "Your father trained you well. Now, timing is everything. We could execute this immediately. But that's reactive. Better to wait for the perfect moment when they're vulnerable." "What kind of moment?" "Stratasini's quarterly earnings call is in 6 weeks, if patterns hold. And if Evan Brooks is as reckless as you've described, there will be a crisis. There always is with executives who prioritize disruption over stability. When that happens, when the board is panicking and stakeholders are nervous, that's when we strike." I stared at the rain-streaked windows, processing the reversal of fortune. This morning I'd been discarded. Now I held papers that could flip the entire power structure. "There's something else," Richard continued. "Your father's stake, even diluted over the years, was significant. The 51% clause doesn't create shares, it transfers existing ones from the current majority stakeholders. Evan Brooks, Daniel Morrison, the board members who backed this coup, they'll lose everything. They don't deserve a warning." "Did they warn you? Did 15 years of service earn you anything beyond a security escort from the building?" Richard's voice carried an edge. I recognized the controlled fury of someone who'd watched too many good people crushed by corporate machinery. "Your father believed in building things. These people believe in taking things. Let them learn the difference." We spent 3 hours documenting everything, building a timeline that painted a clear picture of constructive dismissal. Richard had his team pull corporate records, confirming the clause remained buried in supplemental filings that predated digital conversion. Unless someone specifically knew to look for it, it was invisible. "What do I do now?" I asked as we finished. "Live your life. Let them think they've won. Update your LinkedIn. Go to some networking events. Be visible in your defeat. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the legal framework. When the moment comes, we'll need to move fast filing with the state, notifying the board, transferring the shares before they can mount a defense." I stood to leave, then paused. Richard, why did my father really leave? He always said he was tired. But he saw what was coming. The shift from builders to extractors. From innovation to manipulation. He couldn't stop it then, but he left you the tools to fight it now. Richard handed me the briefcase. He'd be proud of what you're about to do. The 5 o'clock deadline passed without my response. Sarah Williams left 2 voicemails, each increasingly frustrated. Evan sent a single text. Disappointing but not surprising. Good luck out there. That night, I sat in my father's study, the briefcase open before me. The papers that had seemed like musty relics this morning now felt like loaded weapons. Evan Brooks thought he'd pushed out a middle-aged executive who'd outlived her usefulness. He had no idea he'd just activated a 40-year-old trap set by a man who understood that in corporate warfare. The best defense isn't a shield, it's a hidden blade, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The next 6 weeks required Oscar-worthy performance art. I attended networking events at the Washington Technology Industry Association, smiled through informational interviews at Amazon and Microsoft, updated my LinkedIn with appropriately humble yet optimistic posts about embracing new chapters. Former colleagues reached out with sympathy and job leads, unaware that I was tracking Stratosini's every move like a hunter watching wounded prey. Richard's intelligence network proved invaluable. A paralegal at his firm had a brother in Stratosini's accounting department. A former client sat on the board of a major Stratosini customer. Piece by piece, we assembled a picture of Evan's brave new world, and it was exactly as catastrophic as I'd predicted. The first crack appeared in week 3. Evan had promised the board a revolutionary AI-driven platform that would automate 60% of their enterprise clients' workflows. The demo to Boeing, a contract worth $40 million annually, failed spectacularly when the system crashed halfway through, corrupting test data in the process. Jake Morrison, my replacement, lacked the experience to implement proper fail-safes. Week 4 brought a data breach, not massive, but significant enough to trigger compliance reviews. The security protocols I'd spent 3 years implementing had been deemed unnecessarily restrictive by Evan's innovation team. They'd loosened them to increase agility. Now client data from 12 accounts was potentially compromised. Maria, still loyal despite everything, fed me information through carefully worded personal emails. Hope you're well. The office misses your steady hand. Lots of late nights here trying to stabilize things. Translation: everything was on fire. Richard and I met weekly at a discreet cafe in Fremont, reviewing documentation and refining strategy. The earnings call is Thursday, he said during our 5th meeting. Stock's down 12% this month. The board will be looking for someone to blame. Evan will throw everyone under the bus except himself. I predicted. Let him. The more desperate he appears, the more receptive they'll be to our solution. We scheduled our strike for the following Monday, 3 days after the earnings call. Enough time for panic to set in, but not enough for them to develop a recovery strategy. Richard had everything prepared: state filing documents, transfer orders, even a press release ready to go to the Seattle Times and TechCrunch. The earnings call was a masterpiece of corporate disaster. Daniel Morrison stumbled through prepared remarks while analysts pressed about the Boeing failure, the security breach, and rumors of a mass exodus of senior engineers. Evan, brought in to explain his strategic vision, used so much jargon that one analyst actually asked if he could translate that into English. The stock dropped another 8% in after-hours trading. Friday morning, Richard made the calls, first to the Secretary of State's office, filing the ownership transfer documents, then to Stratosini's general counsel, a man named Harrison who Richard knew from law school. Harry, you'll want to sit down for this, Richard said over the speakerphone while I listened. I'm representing Lauren Mitchell in the matter of wrongful termination and automatic stock transfer pursuant to the supplemental agreement of March 15, 1982. The silence lasted so long I thought we'd lost connection. Richard, that can't be valid. Filed with the state, never superseded, never challenged. I'm sending you the documentation now. The transfer is automatic and already in process. Lauren Mitchell now controls 51% of Stratosini systems. This is impossible. The board needs to meet. The board serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder, Richard interrupted smoothly. That's Lauren now. She'll be attending Monday's emergency board meeting. I suggest you have security ready to escort out anyone she designates for removal. Within an hour, my phone exploded with calls. Daniel Morrison left 3 voicemails, each more panicked than the last. Board members who hadn't known my name 6 weeks ago suddenly needed to speak with me urgently. Evan Brooks tried calling twice, then sent a text. "We should talk. There's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I stood in my father's study, looking at his old photograph from Stratasini's founding day, 5 people in a garage, believing they could build something that mattered. On Monday, I'd walk back into that building not as an employee, not as a victim, but as the majority owner of everything Evan Brooks thought he'd conquered. Richard called Saturday evening. "The transfer is complete, states confirmed, lawyers are scrambling, and the board is in full panic mode. One member already called asking about your plans." "What did you tell them?" "That Lauren Mitchell doesn't forget 15 years of dedicated service, or who destroyed it." I pulled out my laptop and began drafting my remarks for Monday's meeting. Not a speech of vengeance, but a declaration of restoration. Stratasini would remember what it was built to be, and Evan Brooks would learn that innovation without foundation is just another word for collapse. The briefcase sat beside me, empty now but somehow heavier with purpose. My father's ghost had given me the weapon. Monday. I'd show them all how to use it. Monday arrived wrapped in Pacific Northwest mist, the kind that makes Seattle feel like it exists between worlds. I chose my outfit carefully, the navy suit I'd worn to my father's funeral, paired with his cufflinks I'd found in the briefcase. Power dressed in memory and purpose. Richard met me in the Stratasini lobby at 9:45. The security guard, Ahmad, did a double take when he saw me. "Ms. Mitchell," but I thought, "She owns the company now," Richard said simply, sliding the legal documents across the desk. "We'll need visitor badges for my legal team and immediate access to the boardroom." Ahmad's eyes widened as he read. I need to call someone. "Call Harrison in legal. He's expecting us." The elevator ride to the 40th floor, the executive level I'd rarely visited as an employee, felt like ascending to a different atmosphere. Through the glass doors of the boardroom, I could see them gathered 12 board members in various states of distress, Daniel Morrison pacing by the windows, and Evan Brooks seated at the head of the table like he still owned the place. We entered without knocking. The room fell silent except for the rain pattering against glass. Every face turned toward me, some confused, others horrified, a few almost relieved. Evan's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally something close to fear. "This is a private board meeting," he started, rising from his chair. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "My board meeting, and you're in my seat." Harrison, the general counsel, cleared his throat. "The documentation has been verified. Ms. Mitchell now holds 51% controlling interest in Stratasine Systems. The transfer was automatic upon wrongful termination, per the founders' agreement." "This is ridiculous," Daniel sputtered. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can—" I moved to the head of the table, standing behind Evan's chair. He hadn't moved. "The clause my father embedded in the founding documents is clear. Termination without cause triggers immediate transfer. You provided no cause, only corporate buzzwords about restructuring and fresh perspectives." Board member Patricia Wong, someone I'd always respected, spoke carefully. "Lauren, surely we can discuss this. The company is in a delicate position." "Because of his leadership," I interrupted, gesturing to Evan. 3 weeks after firing me, you've lost Boeing, suffered a data breach, and watched your stock price crater. The innovation revolution promised. It's been a masterclass in destroying institutional knowledge." Richard distributed folders to each board member. Inside, you'll find Ms. Mitchell's initial directives as majority shareholder. They opened them simultaneously, creating a synchronized rustle of paper. I watched their faces change as they read. "Effective immediately," I announced. "Evan Brooks is terminated. Security is waiting outside